Texas and other states are sending some of the migrants to those so-called sanctuary cities.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. Good morning. Yes, good morning. We're joining us now. We're going to talk to Graham Stringer, who's the Labour MP for Blackley and Broughton. Graham, good morning to you. Good morning to you.
Morning.
Can we ask you first about the Post Office? The statement by Kemi Badenoch yesterday. She came out all guns blazing. I don't recall a Secretary of State using that language quite such colourful language. Did she convince you that the Post Office, the former Post Office chairman, has effectively lied about the suggestion that she wanted the compensation process slowed up?
The evidence isn't there, so I'm not convinced either way. What I do know is that this is an unseemly mess. And the victims of this, the postmasters and mistresses, have not had justice. They've not had the money they're owed. The vast majority of them still haven't been paid out. And it's just another huge mess that this government has created.
Let's ask about the vote tomorrow, Graham. It's a key vote. It's an SNP motion calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The Labour, you don't need me to remind you, in November, 10 or 11 frontbenchers resigned rather than because they were told they couldn't support a similar vote. What has Keir Starmer got to do tomorrow to avoid another rebellion? Has he got to back that motion or come up with the same sort of wording in his own amendment?
I think coming up with a more meaningful amendment that actually deals with the problem. Just saying we want a ceasefire now, nobody's happy about the slaughter that's going on in Gaza, but there needs to be a solution that leads to there needs to be a long-term solution. I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback on the line at the moment, but the SNP motion is virtue signalling. We need to work with other democracies from Western Europe and North America to get a permanent and long-term solution to the Middle East crisis that has been going on for more than half a century, so that we don't go back to it. You've got to remember that Hamas are committed to genocide. They want to kill all the Jews, destroy Israel. And while they are there and that is their position, there can't really be a ceasefire. A ceasefire needs both parties to agree. And what we actually want is a secure Israel and a state for the Palestinians where they can choose their own leaders, not be dominated by Hamas.
Graham, it's great to have you on. It's great to have a Labour MP on. We should congratulate you on those 2 by-election victories last week. And we just want your assessment of the situation, because we've had several people in this studio who are saying it's not necessarily that the British public are madly in love and inspired by Sir Keir Starmer. They're just sick of the Conservatives. What's your view of that particular decision-making process for the British public at the moment?
I think they are sick of the government. They're generally not greatly enamoured to all politicians at the moment, because quite a lot of things don't work in this country. We've just been talking about the post office, but there's a lot of it. The trains don't work, the motorways are crowded, lots of things don't work. So they don't see a clear way through. I think that attack, that criticism of Keir, is fairly common and regular. What I would say is nobody was enthused by Clem Attlee when he stood in 1945, who I think there is a consensus within the Labour Party and across the country that Clem Attlee, by getting on with it quietly and in his own methodical way, is the best Prime Minister the Labour Party's ever had, and one of the best this country's had.
So could he be the next Clem Attlee, Graham?
Well, that's what I'm saying, really. He's an intelligent man. He's not like Tony Blair, who had the electorate swooning. He doesn't have that charisma that Tony had. But I think he could be a better Prime Minister.
I think we've lost him. We've run out of time anyway.
Graham Stringer. Just before, we just want to say, we want to know, do you have a decent bin collection? Because we're going to have a poll on this later. We're going to tell you about the town where 1 million bins haven't been emptied in less than a year.
That's right. Don't go anywhere.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Another mild day across the south today. There is a band of rain tracking its way in and it's going to turn quite breezy as well. That rain already into Scotland and Northern Ireland will continue to push southwards, so eventually we'll see some rain arriving over northwest England and parts of North and West Wales. It turns a bit brighter across Scotland and Northern Ireland for this afternoon, but some showers will come into the northwest. Further south, most places just dry, fairly cloudy. A bit of brightness could come through at times and quite breezy. But despite the breeze, it's still pretty mild for February, 13, 14 degrees. A little cooler further north, but at least we should see some afternoon sunshine in Belfast and Edinburgh. The rain will continue to track south, kind of fizzling out as it does so. So just a kind of dank night initially, but then heavier rain starts to come in through the early hours into parts of the west. We have a Met Office yellow warning in force for parts of South Wales and South West England. Turning a little chilly in northern Scotland, but for most it'll be another pretty mild night and a very wet start to Wednesday. The rain quickly spreads to northern Scotland, eastern England. For most, a very soggy morning rush hour tomorrow. Some heavy bursts of rain in places. Slowly but surely that rain will clear from the west, so skies again a little brighter here for the afternoon, but in the east it stays pretty dull and damp for most of the day. Temperatures again on the mild side, but generally feeling cooler with the wind and the rain.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Still to come, tributes are pouring in for the former Strictly Come Dancing star Robin Bobby Windsor, who has died unexpectedly at the age of just 44.
Isn't that sad?
Awful, awful. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yep.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offender behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Yeah. Absolutely. So speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Tuesday the 20th of February. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
The Post Office scandal. The Business Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, well, she laid into him, didn't she? She accused the ex-Post Office chairman of spreading falsehoods, in other words, for lies, isn't it? In a blatant attempt, she said, to seek revenge for her decision to sack him.
Mr. Staunton claimed that when he was first appointed as chair of the Post Office, he was told by a senior civil servant to stall on paying compensation. There is no evidence whatsoever that this is true.
And Labour's ceasefire crisis. So Keir Starmer is under huge pressure to back an immediate Gaza ceasefire as the left-wing campaigning group Momentum launches a new campaign urging all MPs to do just that. We'll have the latest.
And Prince William's going to address the Gaza crisis in the Middle East and the rise in anti-Semitism in Britain. We'll discuss how significant a moment this is.
And backing British farmers, a major boost for British farmers with a new £200 million innovation package. Environment Secretary Steve Barclay spoke to The Breakfast Show.
Absolutely committed to backing British farming. We produce amongst the best food in the world, and what this is doing, it's doubling the grants for equipment, for technology, to drive better productivity, to make our farms more sustainable.
We're going to be talking to two farmers because the Prime Minister is the first Prime Minister to address the National Farmers Unionist Conference since 2008, so they'll have quite a lot to say about
see if they
policy.
Agree with what Steve Barclay was saying. And we're asking you this morning, are you happy with your bin collection? Now, it might not sound that thrilling a topic, but believe me, we believe that you, the British public, care about this stuff.
And we're talking to an MP who says his council is so hopeless, there's 1 million bins not been collected since May. Enough, if you lined them up from the town in the West Country all the way to Paris, maybe it's your town.
Go on X, formerly Twitter, and let us know in our poll whether you are satisfied with the refuse collection that you have at home. Also, email us, gbviews@gbnews.com. But first, here's Sam.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's just gone 2 minutes past 10, our top story this morning. Former Post Office Chairman Henry Staunton has accused the Business Secretary of making up what he called astonishing claims and mischaracterisations. It comes after Kemi Badenoch accused him of spreading falsehoods. The dispute has deepened this week after Mr Staunton claimed he was told to stall compensation payouts to victims of the Post Office scandal because of cost concerns heading into the general election. Kemi Badenoch, though, denies the claims, saying it's a blatant attempt for revenge after the ex-boss was sacked. The government has said it is committed to the Post Office Victims Compensation Scheme, and they've dismissed any suggestion of a delay. Rishi Sunak will pledge his unwavering support for British farming at the National Farmers Union conference later. The Prime Minister is expected to highlight investments of more than £425 million in grants this year, and that includes doubling the funding for technology. The government says the money is part of its commitment to maintain pre-Brexit spending on British farming at £2.4 billion each year. Speaking to GB News earlier this morning, the Environment Secretary, Steve Barclay, said the money will help modernise the sector.
We're absolutely committed to backing British farming. We produce amongst the best food in the world, and what this is doing, it's doubling the grants for equipment, for technology, to drive better productivity, to make our farms more sustainable. It's focusing much more on food security and food production. So it's helping with costs, for example, pesticides and sprays and various things on farm to bring those costs down and to make the most of the technology that is available. So we drive up productivity on farms and allow our farms to compete across the world.
In other news, protesters have gathered in London outside the Royal Courts of Justice in support of Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, who is today making his final appeal against possible extradition to the United States. If you're watching on TV, you can see here large crowds gathered outside the Royal Courts of Justice. They're holding placards with words including "Free Julian Assange" and "Drop the charges." There's some minimal police presence there. We haven't seen many officers at the scene this morning, but as you can see there, large crowds of people gathered in protest, and it comes in part of a long-running ordeal over alleged conspiracy to leak thousands of documents relating to the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. His lawyers are hoping to get the go-ahead to challenge his extradition, which could be his final chance to avoid spending the rest of his life in a US prison. In other news, 94% of councils in the UK are set to raise council tax by the maximum allowed by the government, according to new figures out today. It means that the average Band D household could see an annual increase of just over £100. 17 authorities still haven't confirmed their plans, and 4 previously bankrupt councils have special dispensation for a 10% tax hike. And that comes as 37 councils in England still face a £1.1 billion funding gap over the next 2 years. Lord Cameron has urgently called for an immediate halt to the conflict in Gaza, rather than the all-out Israeli offensive in Gaza that Benjamin Netanyahu is pursuing. The Foreign Secretary says fighting needs to stop so that hostages can be released and aid can reach the region. So far, the UK government has resisted supporting calls for an immediate ceasefire, instead backing a sustainable pause. But international pressure has mounted on Israel amid concerns over its plan to push into Rafah. As ceasefire negotiations stall, the Israeli Prime Minister is still determined, he says, to continue the military offensive, rejecting calls to halt the operation. Meanwhile, Lord Cameron has also reaffirmed the UK's commitment to the Falkland Islands, saying he hopes for a lasting British connection. Speaking after a ceremony honouring those who lost their lives in the 1982 conflict, the Foreign Secretary promised to support the wishes of islanders to remain British. David Cameron's comments come after Argentina's renewed attempts to negotiate the Falklands sovereignty. And later this week, Lord Cameron will also make history again by becoming the first UK Foreign Secretary to visit Paraguay. And finally, Prince William plans to attend more events that recognise the human suffering in response to the ongoing conflict in Gaza and the subsequent rise in anti-Semitism across the globe. He'll meet aid workers providing support in regions and attend a synagogue to have a discussion with young people from different communities. Kensington Palace have said both the Prince and the Princess of Wales are profoundly concerned by the events in the Middle East, and they say they will continue to hold the victims, their families and their friends in their hearts. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
10:07, you're with Britain's News and we're GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. Lots of people getting in touch about the post office, aren't they?
That's right, lots of you. John has said, I'm with Kemi Badenoch. It's great to see one of the privileged business elites brought down to earth sooner or later. She's destined for the top. In my book, she's the only potential rising star with the charisma to fill Boris's shoes.
Yeah, now here's an interesting thing from Charles. He says, if the government pays up quickly, this is the compensation. By the way, Charles, what about Fujitsu paying up, actually?
Quite.
Their dodgy system.
100%.
But he says if the government pays up quickly, then we'll know there's no truth in what Staunton says. However, if they don't. But I think they will, if they can.
I really hope so. Paul said we could give all of the post office people £1 million each and it would be a fraction of what we give to Ukraine every year.
Okay.
See, people aren't silly. They're pulling these threads together, aren't they, and feeling this sense of injustice on behalf of these people who've been victimised here.
And this one says... Mark says he gets sacked and you're siding with him. What a joke. He's just trying to put the blame on. No, I'm certainly not. I'm not siding with Miss Staunton. I'm siding with Kemi Badenoch. I think she came out all guns blazing and good for her. And I think we should get more ministers speaking like that because she didn't leave you in any doubt, did she?
Love that.
Now, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer is under growing pressure to back an immediate ceasefire ahead of a Commons vote called by the Scottish National Party tomorrow in Parliament.
The left-wing organisation Momentum is encouraging all party members to pressure their local MP to do so.
So joining us now is a spokesperson for Jewish Voice for Labour, Naomi Wimborne-Idrissi. Naomi, good morning to you. Could I ask you first of all, before we talk about the vote tomorrow, Prince William is visiting a synagogue today. He's going to talk about the rise in anti-Semitism, and he's also going to refer to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. You will know some years ago he said bringing peace to the Middle East, or doing his bit for peace in the Middle East, would be a lifelong ambition of his. Do you think it's right that he speaks out in this way?
I think it's excellent that a member of the royal family would show concern for the terrible suffering that we're witnessing in the Middle East at the moment. Yes, from my perspective as a Jewish person who supports justice for Palestinians, I really hope that we can get rid of this idea that to support Jews in this country, you have to back Israel, because I'm afraid what Israel is doing is not in the interests of any of us.
Just explain that in a little bit more detail, if you would, Naomi, because people might be a little bit confused about that opinion, because we are being encouraged to be so binary on this topic, aren't we? You've either got to be pro-Israel or you've got to be pro-Palestine. So where do you sit on this?
Right. Well, I'm one of many Jewish people who views what's going on in the Middle East with absolute horror, because we can see the Israeli state, which claims to represent all of us, performing what I believe to be genocidal acts. And as you know, there's a case before the International Court of Justice on this very matter. So I know lots of Jews don't agree with me. Lots of Jews are brought up to believe that Israel and its survival in its current form is vital for their safety and so on. I'm afraid I feel that the reverse is true, that the way Israel carries on is making us much less safe. And because there's this conflation, you talked about confusion quite understandably, people think that Jew equals Zionist or Israeli is the same. Judaism and Zionism are the same thing, and they absolutely are not. And if people believe that it is, then they see a Jewish state performing terrible acts and they take it out on Jews. So it's horrifying that there is an increase in attacks on Jewish people in this country. But I think the reason is pretty clear. It's most unfortunate. It doesn't make it safer for Israel's behaviour.
But Naomi, I must take you back to where this started on October the 7th, the terrible act of terrorism by Hamas, who, you know, it's in their DNA. They want to eradicate the state of Israel. They are the ones, aren't they, who are intent on genocide. They want to destroy the state of Israel, and presumably that means any Jewish person who happens to be in it.
No, I think that's completely wrong. The charter in 1988 was horrendous in its, the Hamas charter at that time was horrendous in its its discussion of Jewish people. But since then, Hamas has become a very different organisation. It's been forced into government, whereas it was originally a sort of social movement, encouraged by the Israeli state, by the way. I saw the Panorama programme last night explaining how Netanyahu in particular, but other Israeli leaders have found it expedient to promote Hamas because it undermines the possibility of Palestinian unity under a secular leadership. It's all a really nasty mess. So I'm afraid history did not begin on October the 7th. The history of this region goes back before 1948, which was the time of the creation of the Israeli state, which for the Palestinians was a catastrophe. They call it the catastrophe, the Nakba, and it's still going on as far as they're concerned. We've now got 1.5, possibly 2 million people. That's equivalent to the populations of Leeds, Glasgow and Sheffield combined, forced into this tiny sliver of land around Rafah and being threatened with ethnic cleansing. And this is not the result of something that happened on October the 7th. What happened on October the 7th was horrendous and shocking and obviously very traumatic for Israelis and for very many Jewish people, including friends of mine. But it didn't begin then. And if there's going to be a solution, Israel has to come under pressure from the international community, not just people saying, we would like it if you abide by humanitarian law. They are not abiding by humanitarian law, and the Labour Party of all parties should be applying pressure. It should be supporting that SNP motion. So I've signed, I've done what Momentum has asked, I've done what the Palestine Solidarity Campaign has asked, written to my MP and said, for goodness sake, any human being should be supporting a ceasefire now, a fair exchange of hostages. The Israelis have been detaining randomly Palestinians in the West Bank, men, women and young children.
But what about the Hamas? What about the hostages Hamas have got? What about the hostages Hamas have got? And we've heard from spokesman Naomi. Hang on. Yeah, okay. We've heard from Hamas spokesman saying they do not want a ceasefire because they do not want the state of Israel to continue. You seem to think they've changed. I don't think they have.
I don't think they've said that at all. I've said they want the oppression of the Palestinian people to cease. They want the siege of Gaza, which has gone on since 2007, to cease. A real siege, medieval type siege. And unfortunately, because they are people I don't agree with, I don't support their methods and I don't support their ideology, but they are gaining support because of the way Israel treats Palestinian people. Look at the pictures of these young children suffering terribly, injured themselves, many killed. 70,000 orphans now in Gaza because of the Israeli bombardment, which has killed, going on for 30,000 people. And yet we have our leaders saying, oh, no, we don't want a ceasefire. That would strengthen Hamas. Come on. You know, there have been genocides in the past, which we now all express our abhorrence over. This one we're watching now, we can stop it now. We can say to Israel, we are not funding you, we are not arming you until you talk about Palestinian rights. The whole history of the... Yeah, go on.
Just go back, just where we started, Naomi, the vote is tomorrow. It's likely that Labour won't support the SNP motion. They'll table their own motion. If you don't get the Labour Party coming out in favour of an immediate ceasefire, you are Jewish Voice for Labour. Where does that leave you with the Labour Party?
We're already in a very difficult situation with the Labour Party because for some years now, people who support justice for Palestinians have been accused of anti-Semitism. I myself personally was expelled. So I'm a Jewish woman. I was elected to Labour's National Executive Committee in 2022. And before I could even take my seat, an excuse was found to expel me because I'd spoken at a meeting organised by a group that the party leadership didn't approve of. That was the reason. So we already have a problem. And you may be aware there's a movement now, which I'm not personally involved with, but because I'm not a councillor, but it's mainly for people who've been elected to council positions, resigning from Labour, many being expelled from Labour, and they've got a movement called No Ceasefire, No Vote. And they are urging people up and down the country, when elections come up, and of course it's going to happen, municipal elections quite soon, they will urge people not to vote for any candidate who has not campaigned for a ceasefire, called for a ceasefire. It's very serious. All over the country there are people up in arms against the Labour leadership for its position.
OK, thank you, Naomi. That's absolutely fascinating. Spokesperson from Jewish Voice for Labour, Naomi Winborn-Idrissi. And I think I agree with a lot of what she said.
Well, it's a big vote. It's a big vote tomorrow, and he will not want his MPs to support a Scottish National Party motion, which is pathetic, the worst sort of party politics. Oh, no, we can't support the Scottish National Party one. Can't they just come together on an issue? So he'll frame it. But I think he's going to add words like sustainable. It won't be enough for people like Naomi.
Yeah. Well, I think what she says about...
But I also take the point, look, Hamas have not given up those hostages. Why should there be a ceasefire till they get those hostages?
And she would say, but Israel also have got hostages that they have not given up. And they're 30,000 orphans created. This has been going on since the 7th of October. At what point do we say, let's find some sort of diplomatic resolution here?
Oh, this is a great question.
Oh, this is a great story. I love this. If someone was trapped in a car underwater and you saw the emergency services just standing by and waiting for other help, like that man there, what would you do? Would you get in and help the person who is in that car? Well, we will tell you exactly what happened. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
So the highway code was amended recently. passed me by, but anyway, a new poll suggests this has made no difference to the safety of road users, and I could believe that.
Yeah, there was an awful crash in London, wasn't there? A bus and a pedestrian yesterday.
Fatality.
So we're asking, is the highway code fit for purpose, or should we just scrap it altogether? That's our debate this morning, and we're joined by Danny Kelly. She argues highways are not fit for purpose, and cycling instructor Anna Hughes thinks they are. Good morning to you both.
You see, Anna, I think it's a good thing. I think the highway code is a good thing. I just don't think that any of us pay any attention to it, or we should all be tested on it quite regularly, I would have thought. We should have revision courses in it.
Yeah, I think you just summed it up, Eamon, by saying the changes passed you by. I actually asked a few of my fellow cyclists and pedestrians, what is classified as vulnerable road users, about this very thing. I said, has the new highway code made things safer for you? And most people said, not at all. Drivers don't know what it is. They don't know what the changes are. They probably don't know what the rules are to start with. And as you've just said, doing refreshers is a really good idea. It's a bit bizarre that we're given a license to operate this quite dangerous machinery, and then we're never tested again, and especially not on the highway code, which is, especially when it changes, why wouldn't we be retested on that or have to do refresher courses on it? You know, there are conflicts on the road, there are fatalities. It makes sense to be aware of what the highway code says, because it is there to keep us safe.
Yeah, and Danny Kelly, when I think back, I think it was 1999 I passed my driving test. Hardly any bikes on the road then, to be honest, probably virtually none.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
It is 10:20. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce, Bev Turner, and also Tonya Buxton, who was nattering away, and Nigel Nelson. And we're asking you this morning, are you happy with the bin collections in your area? It's more interesting than it sounds, I promise you. Go to Twitter, X, and vote on our poll. Lots of you getting in touch about your bin.
And so far, 60% say they're in favour.
I'm very
having
happy.
a good bin poll.
Yes. I'm very happy. My bin men are fantastic.
Mine are not.
Yeah? Well, we're going to come on to this in a minute because you'll be on the edge of your seats, I know, but a couple had to rescue a driving instructor, that's right, who was trapped in 4 foot of water while the emergency crews did nothing but stand by. Have a look.
Yeah, we've got just one bloke who's over the steering wheel, mate. He's all right. You can't open the windows.
I'm going to see. So what we're looking at here, particularly if you're listening on the radio, this is a car, a little car that's in water up to the middle of the windows. The firemen were stood by waiting for specialist equipment, but there was 2 people nearby who said, we can't just sit here and watch this poor driver in his car. So they waded in, basically overrode the emergency services and got the person out. Nigel Nelson. I bet you wouldn't do that,
What would you have done?
I probably would have done that, actually.
Would you? I'm surprised.
I probably... Why?
I thought you'd have been a very good boy and sort of, you know, defer to the authorities.
No, I probably would have done something like that. I mean, the point basically is that I'm not sure I blame the fire officers who didn't go into the water.
Why not?
Well, because what they're talking about is that even the rescuer there says this is one of the most dangerous fords in the country, that they're being told that they shouldn't go in up to their waist in water, as we know from that film. What they did was call for specialist water crews.
It was miles away. It was miles away, the specialist equipment, so it could have taken a very long time. You can see how deep
the question. Yeah.
How long was it going to take to get there?
And the argument then was that actually, while they were waiting for him to arrive, the driver was actually safe. Because the water is not that deep.
Well, it's deep.
But it'd be scary.
It'd be
He was in shock.
It's completely ridiculous. You know why they couldn't get in? Because they weren't wader trained. They weren't wader trained. So these two members of the public who didn't need wader training to go open the door.
He's got his waders on.
He has got his waders on, but to go in the door and the woman who's with him didn't have any waders on. Go and open the door, get him out safely, because you don't know how the change might have been and how it might be swept off or filled up. And the fact that there were 2 fireman trucks there, two of them were there, and they just stood there and wouldn't go and help. I mean, it's just, firemen are supposed to be heroes. Oh, give me a break. Just get in there and get that man out. Freezing and frightened. He was in shock.
He was
absolute shock. Yeah.
You just think that could be your dad, and he's not a young man. They're getting out, and look, those people are probably in their 30s.
Yeah.
And they just stepped
well
in.
done.
Proper good.
But they did the right thing. That's the important thing.
Yes, you could say that, unless the car had been swept away and all 3 of them had then been swept away down the river.
The firefighters might have done something.
But maybe they weren't wader trained or swimming trained or something.
It's kind of ridiculous, and it's health and safety gone mad. You're a fireman. Someone's in trouble. You've signed up for that job. That's why when we see firemen, we think they're heroes, and we give money to their charities and do all of that.
For those listening on the radio, there was a firefighter literally leaning over the fence while that couple were getting him out.
Yeah.
Just leaning over the fence, not helping. I think it's unbelievable.
I do. I think it's very disappointing.
My brother-in-law was a firefighter, a very brave man. I know what Pete would have said. We should have gone in and got them.
Is it a coincidence that the people who rescued him have their own YouTube channel in which they video themselves doing remarkable things?
Well,
I don't know, but...
good luck to them.
It's
If
quite
that
professionally done.
landed on their lap, why not?
And listen, we're discussing it, and it's a good discussion, isn't
Absolutely.
it? What's happened to our emergency services? The police don't arrest people who should be arrested causing threat to life and limb with some of these demonstrators on motorways and things, and now we've got the firefighters not intervening.
Right, what's our latest immigration scandal? Tonya, do you know all about this?
I can't believe this. So this is all about that if you've got a private jet, it's very likely that Border Force don't check who's coming in and out of your private jet. So, forget about it being an immigration problem, because, who knows how many illegal immigrants are coming through that way. But also is that you don't know if they're trafficking victims.
Yeah.
You don't know if they're bringing extremists in. You don't know if there's drugs coming in.
Yeah.
So it's this high-risk flight of these private jets that we know, I know for a fact, during lockdown, those that had their private jets and were doing whatever they liked. We had people checking our papers if we wanted to get out of the country
or going to a restaurant.
Or going into a restaurant or doing anything, and these private jets were doing exactly as they pleased. But there's no border force checking these private jets. Hundreds of people are coming into the country, we don't know who they are.
This was exposed at London City Airport, which is a small airport, but what we don't know, Nigel, is how many other airports.
This was the one that was... This was the one inspected, and so we only know that one airport was affected. What it meant was 21% of these flights were not being checked.
Oh, you can go through, sir. We know you.
Yeah. Well, we don't know that happened. It just seems that it's the lack of staffing and so on. I don't think this is an immigration issue. What it is an issue for is gangsters, terrorists. A lot of these flights coming from the Middle East. The fact that once people know they can get in without any checks whatsoever, that's really dangerous. A terrorist is more likely to come in on a plane than they are across the channel, because they go straight into the hands of the authorities anyway if they do that.
And it feels a little bit like it's this assumption, well, the rich people in their private jets, they're not going to be committing any crimes, are they? We'll just go for the people coming over on their EasyJet flights.
But they commit bigger crimes.
Well, this is what I was just thinking.
From Costa del Sol, with their drugs and then...
That's the point,
Anyway.
Yeah. And if there's no checks at all, but quite clearly this has gone wrong, that Border Force should be checking every single flight that comes in, no matter what it is.
Well, it's a glimpse of the future, isn't it? When those who can fly, and they can fly with impunity, and the rest of us are going to be sat at home.
Yeah.
Right, moving on. Cameron on the Falklands, Nigel. What's he doing over there?
Well, he's the first foreign secretary to visit it for 30 years.
Amazing, really.
That is remarkable.
Yes, I do as well. Douglas Hurd was the last one, and he was there. Yeah, he was there in '94. Yeah.
Amazing.
And no one's been since of that kind of level. What he's doing basically is saying to them, look, you're not going to join Argentina. We respect your sovereignty, your right to be British. basically, he's sending a signal to Argentina. The position has not changed since 1982 when the war happened.
Because there's a new president in Argentina.
Yes.
Put it mildly, is erratic.
Yes.
And has said some very inflammatory things about La Malvinas.
That's right.
The election campaign.
That's right.
Basically saying that Argentina would reclaim the Falklands.
Yeah, and what David Cameron is saying is, as long as the islanders want to remain British, and if that is for all time, that is the situation as far as Britain's concerned.
I really remember the Falklands War.
I really do.
I remember being.
I covered it.
What year was it, Nigel?
It was 82.
So I was 9. And I remember...
That was just bitchy, I know.
Well, I remember being really frightened by the fact that we were at war.
Well, for me as a Cypriot, it had great meaning. Because bear in mind that, you know, Cyprus is between Greece and Turkey's right next to it, and we are invaded. We are still an invaded country.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been nice if, you know, someone in Britain had come and helped us out, but, you know, now we are an occupied territory. So it was very important for me as a Cypriot to see Britain defend the Falklands and make sure that they defended them, and it was up to the people what they wanted to be, not whatever was close by.
We don't, as you say, though, it's interesting, because I bet if you asked a lot of young British people what the significance is of the Falklands to us, they would have no idea.
They wouldn't know where they are.
No, exactly.
I can remember when they were invaded, a lot of people thought they were up near the Orkney.
That's right.
Yeah.
We thought it was
absolutely true.
A lot of us thought they were in Scotland. Where's the Falklands?
We all get an atlas.
Yeah, I was based in America at the time, so I was covering the diplomatic aspects of the war from Washington and New York. But I had to get a world map out and find out where are they exactly.
I know. But here's the thing, Tonya. It was an extraordinary achievement. Mrs. Thatcher sent the task force to reclaim the Falklands. Very brave and courageous, and the troops were brilliant. If the Falklands were invaded now by Argentina, I don't think the Royal Navy would be capable of getting any ships over there at all.
Well, you're completely right. They would not be able to.
Because they've got enough sailors, they'd let ships.
But we're too busy bodying, interfering in everybody else's business and not our own. That's partly the reason as well.
Teaching them about climate change, remember? The sailors.
All of that, but also interfering in places that we shouldn't be interfering.
I do indeed, but you can't bring climate change into this one.
Yeah, well, because we were talking about it last week, Nigel. The Royal Navy's got to teach sailors about climate change. No, we just want more sailors, we want more ships.
We do want sailors to defend our shores. Our shores is the point that I'm trying to make here, is that we've been too busy interfering with other people's business, whether it be Ukraine, whether it be the Middle East, wherever it is, when we're not able or capable to look after what belongs to us.
We do keep a contingent on the Falkland Islands, a pretty large one, about 1,800 troops. Yeah. So any idea of an invasion? Last time round we had 90 on the islands.
Yeah, and
this time we have a proper garrison.
You remember Lord Carrington had removed the protection ship.
That's right.
Money.
That's right.
Have you been to the Falklands?
No. I was just doing, as I say, I had the safe bit, which was the diplomatic stuff in America.
And the Premier Americans tried to get Mrs. Thatcher to settle with the Argentinians, and she was having none of it.
That's right. Absolutely. My colleagues who did go to the Falklands immediately got arrested and taken to Argentina.
The irony.
They did.
Right, thanks, guys. Still to come, we're going to be talking to Jenny Watson. So she's setting up the first bar open only to biological women. Is it fair to exclude trans women? That and much more after your morning's news.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. It's just coming up to 32 minutes past 10. Our top story this morning, former Post Office Chairman Henry Staunton has accused the Business Secretary of making up astonishing claims and mischaracterisations. It comes after Kemi Badenoch accused him of spreading falsehoods. The dispute deepened this week after Mr Staunton claimed he was told to stall compensation payouts to the victims of the Post Office scandal because of cost concerns heading into the general election. Kemi Badenoch denies those claims, though, saying it's a blatant attempt for revenge after the ex-boss was sacked. The government said that it is committed to the Post Office victims' compensation scheme, and they've dismissed any suggestion of a delay. Rishi Sunak is set to pledge his unwavering support for farmers today at the National Farmers Union Conference. The Prime Minister is expected to highlight investments of more than £425 million in grants this year, and that includes double the funding for technology schemes from robotics to solar and research. The government says the money is part of its commitment to maintain pre-Brexit spending on British farming at around £2.4 billion each year. Protesters have gathered in London in support of Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, who is making his final appeal against possible extradition to the United States. He's wanted in the US over an alleged conspiracy to leak thousands of documents relating to the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. Assange's lawyers are hoping to get the go-ahead to challenge the extradition, which is likely to be his final chance to be granted an appeal here in the UK. His supporters have said he could face up to 175 years in prison if he's extradited. And 94% of councils are set to raise their council tax by the maximum amount allowed by the government, according to new figures. That means a 4.99% increase could come into force in April in 128 councils across the country, or for an average Band D household, an average increase each year of £100. 17 authorities still haven't confirmed their plans, and 4 previously bankrupt councils have special dispensation for a 10% tax rise. It comes as 37 councils in England still face a £1.1 billion funding gap over the next 2 years. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a look at the markets this morning. The pound will buy you $1.2608 and €1.1675. The price of gold is currently £1,605.74. That's per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,723 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Now, don't go anywhere. Strictly Come Dancing star Robin Windsor has very sadly died, aged just 44.
Too soon. We're going to reflect on his career next.
But first, in a new GB News series, Innovation Britain, we're looking at the success of British manufacturing around the country.
PP Control and Automation are an electrical control system builder. Now, they've had a record year. So, Tony, what's behind this growth? And also, why are you so integral to UK manufacturing?
Our business produces control and automation systems that go onto machinery. The machinery is used to make everything we buy, everything that we touch, everything that we see. So our company is supplying automation into companies that will make machines that could milk cows, that could cut metal, that could put labels on fruit, that could put meat in trays. So everything we do is really affecting that ability of people to want and buy things and how things happen.
So why have you had such a successful year then?
We're seeing the growth of automation across many sectors now. We need to invest in automation, as I said before, and there are skill shortages now that also exist. So certain processes that used to be done by people are now being done by machines.
So what is it you as a company are doing then?
We're investing ourselves, so although we talk about automation, we need to invest ourselves. We've spent over £2 million investing in automation for certain parts of our processes, and we're working with customers really to promote automation into new sectors.
So then what is it that you're doing with regards to automation?
Well, in addition to promoting automation to other industries, we're investing heavily in automation ourselves. So we've invested over £2 million in automation for cable manufacture and test. That's enabling us to scale and work with some really exciting companies in some really exciting new sectors, such as ESG, hydrogen and renewables. Now, that's really important for us as a business. It's really important for those companies, and ultimately it's helping us scale and grow ourselves. So our own investment is helping us help those companies grow and develop.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World. Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yeah.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-service men and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offender behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Strictly Come Dancing star Robin Windsor has died sadly at age just 44. We're going to speak to the showbiz reporter Rebecca Toomey. Rebecca, this is a terrible shock.
It is. It sort of really shocked the showbiz world to me because he was so young. He's 44, and the Strictly cast are just so famous. It's such a well-loved show, and he was on it for 4 years. And also, he really transformed some of the lives and the experience of the celebrities who he was paired with at the time. So one of the most famous contestants he danced with was Lisa Riley, former Emmerdale actress. And she really spoke about how much he, made her feel good about herself and how much she fell in love with dance. And there you can see just on the screen is with Deborah Meaden as well. He's had a whole cast of celebrities who he's helped fall in love with dance. And also, he's a phenomenal dancer. He started dancing when he was just age 3, moved to London to pursue him at 15. He was a real expert in, ballroom and Latin dance. And I think he brought so much passion, energy. You can just see in these images what a performer. It's hard to say he was, but I wouldn't say he is, but what a brilliant performer he was. And the passion he had for dance and how he shared it with so many people.
Rebecca, he wasn't in Strictly in the last few years, was he? Do we know the circumstances under which he left the show?
Yeah, so he left in 2013 when he slipped a disc, and he was essentially forced to step back from dancing in fear of doing further damage to himself because, the repercussions of that to keep moving. But he did actually come back to the show in 2014, a year later. He has been dancing since. So he has been doing lots of different shows. He has just recently been doing something with another Strictly dancer, Christina Rianoff, and the two of them have been dancing. He's been doing, he did a Moulin Rouge, the musical, quite famous now, tribute as well. So he had still come back to dancing while he did sustain injury, which is quite natural in that profession with his incredible career that he had. He did have to step back from Strictly, and I think that was probably a real shame because it's such a huge part of their lives, those dancers.
We don't know the cause of death at the moment, Rebecca, and looking at his website, the family have said it's with deep sorrow that we announce the tragic passing of our beautiful Robin. Robin was a strong advocate for mental health. He worked closely with the Sane charity, and the dance world has lost some of its sparkle today. We ask for the family's privacy at this very difficult time. Really heartbreaking I imagine, for not just his family, but of course all those people whose lives he touched, including one of the people he danced with, Susanna Reid, who you know, Andrew.
Yeah, very distressed by it.
Yep, you could see she was holding back the tears this morning when she spoke about, when she had to announce what had happened on Good Morning Britain. That's just one of the characters who danced with her in a Christmas special. But yes, you mentioned there his charity work. He did do so much for, male cancer, for LGBTQ plus rights. He did a lot with HIV charities. So he used his platform for such a good situation. We don't want to speculate at the moment as to, the cause of death. It's just at this moment in time, such a tragedy, because like I said, he touched so many different lives with his dance and then his charity work, and he's continued to dance. So while I think fans will just very much miss him, particularly as you mentioned, some of those celebrities who were lucky enough to dance with him.
Yeah. OK, thank you very much, Rebecca. Rebecca's phone me there, reflecting on the loss of Robin Windsor.
Far too young, very sad.
Now, women's rights have long been under threat from the trans lobby, it seems, and now we are fighting back.
Feminist campaigner Jenny Watson, she's opening Britain's first lesbian members bar, available only to biological women. We're delighted she joins us now in the studio.
Thank you.
Have you opened yet, Jenny?
No, we haven't. So it's hoping to open later in this year.
OK, have you got a name for the bar yet?
L Community.
Right.
So, first of all, I couldn't think of a name. And I thought, OK, let's just get to the strategical work and we'll put a little, a quick name. And I thought, it's going to be a community space. So just L Community. We'll go back to it later on. And then it just stuck.
And so why the need for this women-only bar?
So I don't know if you know, but we had a lot of controversy surrounding the speed dating issue.
No, go on. So tell me about that.
So we were first platformed on Free Speech Nation. And
on this very channel?
Yeah. And there was a lot of backlash and controversy, and venues no longer want to platform us.
So this is because you wanted a speed dating facility that was for women to meet other women, and they had to be biologically born women.
Yeah, that's it.
Doesn't seem that controversial.
It does not. But we've had men turn up who've behaved inappropriately, and so we just had to take a stance.
How will you, Jenny, maybe an obvious question, how will you be able to completely establish that the women who come to your bar are biological women?
Well, that is the controversial question. That is the controversial question. However, we're going to have terms and conditions, and if you breach those, then you're going to be ejected from our private members club. So it's going to be
private members.
Exactly. So it's going to be a private members club.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Southwark in South London?
Yeah. Southwark, and you wouldn't think Southwark, would you? You would think Soho, Shoreditch, somewhere a bit cooler.
I think it's quite edgy, Southwark. You've got Ministry of Sound down there.
Well, exactly, yeah. And also you have a lot of, train connections, Waterloo, it borders other good areas. So.
And haven't we got to this extraordinary place now where we're having to come up with these inventive ideas to have spaces for women that aren't subject to any kind of infiltration, let's say, from trans activists. I think it's really important on this topic to distinguish between trans people who want to live a quiet,
Well, exactly, and I know many of those people. During my university days, I lived with 2 trans people. And then another 2 friends, and everything was fine, and they weren't trying to infringe upon our rights, but things just escalated.
And do you think there's a good market for where you're going with this? Good market? How?
I think people are fed up.
Yeah.
I think they're very, very fed up, and I think the tide is turning at the moment. So
you should get J.K. Rowling to open the bar, because she's
that would be nice.
Of women-only spaces. She's not gay, of course, but
But she's a supporter of the lesbians, So she's So
when's it opening?
So later in the year.
Right.
Brilliant. So we're sort of almost halfway towards our investment goal. So just a bit more work to do, and then hopefully towards the end of the year.
Okay. When you're ready to open it, let us know and we'll get you back on.
Yeah, definitely.
We'd be
Definitely.
Fantastic.
Good luck.
Okay.
Thank you, Jenny.
very much.
Jenny Watson there.
Thank you.
Right, up next, can the Prime Minister win over the farmers? He's making a speech to them any minute now, and we are going to be joined by two farmers to discuss what support it is that they actually need. I love hearing from farmers. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
You have a president in President Biden who's not enforcing the law that was passed by Congress. President Obama, criticize him or not, actually enforced the law and was deporting people that had crossed illegally. Of course, President Trump enforced the law and improved the law to make sure that and worked with Mexico to have the Remain in Mexico policy. Biden has abandoned federal policy. In fact, he's deliberately trying to let in as many immigrants as possible. More for the Democrats, more is better and less is racist.
Just astonishing. And the statement that Greg Abbott put out is really feisty stuff. He said the federal government has broken the contract between the United States and the state of Texas. And the eye numbers, Greg, are simply eye-watering. 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed our southern border in just 3 years, Governor Abbott says. That's more than the population of 33 states in the United States. Astonishing numbers.
And Martin, that's just Texas. If you add Arizona and other border states, you know, it's pushing 10 million. By the end of Biden's term, it'll be 11 million. A study by Yale University a few weeks ago, 3 very liberal professors that did the study estimate there's 22 million illegal aliens. So this is a crisis that was created by Biden. It's what he wants. They want unfettered access to the border. They're letting them in. It's a real hardship on the working people of Texas and other border states. And now it's a real hardship on cities that the federal government, as well as the governors of Texas and other states, are sending some of the migrants to those so-called sanctuary cities.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Prime Minister is due to announce a series of measures to help farmers. He's speaking at the National Union of Farmers Conference in Birmingham. Will they go far enough?
Well, let's speak to two farmers now, Gareth Wynne-Jones and Kelly Seaton, both friends of the show. Good morning to you both. Are you on the edge of your seat? Kelly, let's start with you to hear what Rishi Sunak has to say for you today.
Oh, I think it's likely to be empty promises. I was at the farming conference last year and he didn't actually make an appearance. He came in on a video that was pre-recorded, which kind of made me cringe as he told everyone how he too had been up milking cows in his constituency. It was so embarrassing. I think what we're going to see is a promise of money that's being reallocated. It's not actually new money being put into the system. But ultimately, we don't want subsidies. What we want is a fair price for our food. The reason subsidies actually exist is to keep food at a fair price for the consumer, not to bulk up the pockets of farmers. So, yeah, I would like to see a fairer price rather than throwing money at the situation that is likely not to make that much of a difference.
Well, Gareth, what we think he's going to say, he's going to announce money for grants so you can have machines to pick vegetables and fruit and stuff on your farm rather than relying on cheap migrant labour. And he's obviously watched Jeremy Clarkson's farm programme, and he's then going to make it easier for people like you to have farms and cafes and that sort of stuff on your farm. Is that music to your ears, or is it window dressing?
I've just got to laugh because we're devolved in Wales, so it won't mean an iota of a difference for us. That money will be kept in England. Our First Minister has told us all yesterday that farmers aren't going to tell him where to spend the subsidy money. Now, like Kelly, you know, I want a fair price for what I'm producing. And I think, you know, smokes and mirrors a lot of these things because there's an election year and he's looking to try and get back into the rural community by dropping some money, which is great. Look, I'm not going to say, no, I wish we were having that money in Wales. But what I can tell you, and this is breaking news for you, you're the first media outlet to hear it, there is going to be a big demonstration in Cardiff next week on Wednesday, and you're the first media to hear that. There's a lot of people that are going to go down peacefully, respectfully, and just ask the question on Welsh Government, what are you doing to Welsh agriculture? Sorry for hijacking this, but I think it's an important part of the news today that needs to get out there, and people need to understand. As farmers all across the UK are on our knees. We need the support of the general public, or people are going to go hungry. We are sleepwalking into food shortages. Let's build a better Britain on our bellies. Let's have this farming food revolution. But governments in England, Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland have to understand, don't bite the hand that feeds you, and that's the farmer.
Kelly, we're going to be going to Rishi Sunak live in just a moment. Can he do anything, just briefly, about the pricing that is set by the supermarkets?
Yeah, I think there are talks at the moment about making a fairer supply chain. That's part of what he's going to announce, is making it fairer for egg producers, dairy producers, and I think pork producers. But I don't know how effective it will be. We've seen previously things that have come out haven't been that effective. Yeah. So let's see what happens.
All right. Well, thank you both.
Stay with us, because I think we're going to come back to you.
We're going to try and come back to you when we've heard Rishi Sunak speak to see if you are happy with what he's said. Lots more to come as well this morning. Don't go anywhere. This is GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good day to you. I'm Alex Berkill, and here's your latest GB News weather update. It is going to be a very wet day for many of us tomorrow, but before then we have a spell of wet and windy weather pushing its way southeastwards across the country. That's in association with a cold front that has already brought some rain across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland already today, and it is now pushing into parts of Northern England and Wales too. Ahead of this, we are likely to stay mostly dry across the southeast, at least during daylight hours, but behind it we have a scattering of showers across parts of Scotland. Some of these could be heavy, perhaps even thundery, with some hail and some winteriness over the higher ground too. A bit fresher towards the northwest behind the front, but in the southeast it is again going to be mild, temperatures well above average for the time of year. The rain pushes its way into southern areas as we go through the evening and overnight, so a cloudy, damp picture here. Clearer skies further north, allowing for a touch of frost across parts of Scotland to start the night, but as we go through the early hours we are going to see that swathe of wet weather feeding into many areas. That will lift the temperatures, as we are going to see plenty of cloud and some strong winds with it too. That rain then pushes to all areas as we go through tomorrow morning, so a very wet start to the day for many of us. The heaviest rain likely to be in the southwest. Here we are likely to see some impacts with disruption to travel and some localised flooding too, but the rain does clear away towards the east as we go through the afternoon, with something brighter following in behind. Temperatures still above average for the time of year, but it is going to be windy. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, let's cross live now to Birmingham, where Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, is addressing the National Farmers Union.
You've been a formidable champion of our farmers. Always fair, always thoughtful, and always forceful. If you ask some of my ministers sitting down there, they'd probably say very forceful. But I know everyone will want to join me in once again paying a special tribute and a thanks to Minette for everything that she's done. Now, 9 years ago, I gave my maiden speech in the House of Commons. I pledged that day to be a champion of agriculture, the countryside, and all of my hard-working rural constituents. It's farmers who feed us. Farmers who embody those British values of strength, resilience, warmth, and independence. I see that in North Yorkshire and across the country, week in and week out. I've spent time in our auction marts, walked the fields up and down in Swaledale and Wensleydale, enjoyed our high-quality British meat, which, let me tell you, we will continue to support people to eat. I visited upland farms, hill farms, arable and livestock farms. I even tried my hand at milking once, not very successfully, I must say. But I see firsthand the long hours that you work, the weather that you contend with, the family businesses that you support, the communities you build, the beautiful countryside, the pastures, the hedgerows, the fields that would not be the same without you. You do it not for praise or high reward, but to put food on our tables, to maintain a tradition and a way of life, and to steward our landscape. It's part of who we are, and we don't celebrate you enough. And so, on behalf of the nation, I just wanted to say thank you. Now, while the importance of farmers will never change, farming is going through its biggest change in a generation. And as you do so, this government will be by your side. You've been dealing with soaring global prices in things like fuel and fertilizer. So we've been working hard to get inflation down from 11% to 4% now. And we're increasing payments in our farming schemes by an average of 10%. You're dealing with climate change and extreme weather too. Devastating flooding has damaged crops, delayed planting, and has taken a huge toll on our farming communities. That's why we quickly set out our flooding support and why we're going faster than almost anyone else in the world to tackle climate change, even as we reduce the burdens on families. You're also at the forefront of innovation, from gene editing to boost resilience to disease, to automation to harvest crops. And while, thanks to you, we enjoy good quality food all year round, global events, including Russia's invasion of Ukraine, have put food security back at the top of the agenda. We'll never take our food security for granted. We've got a plan to support British farming, and we're going further again today in 3 specific areas. First, we're investing in farming. We promised that across this Parliament, every penny of the £2.4 billion annual farming budget would be spent on you. And we will absolutely meet that promise. I know that the transition from the Common Agricultural Policy has been frustrating. It's taken time, and I appreciate the perception that we didn't always get the balance exactly right. But I still believe that the vision is the right one. CAP disproportionately rewarded the largest landowners and held back smaller farmers. It did little for food productivity or the environment. It was far, far too bureaucratic. Just remember, we used to argue about whether a cauliflower and a cabbage were the same crop, and you could be fined thousands for a gateway being too wide or a buffer strip too narrow. So it's right that our new system invests in the foundations of food security, from healthy soils to clean water. And we are moving in the right direction. Nearly half of all farmers are now in one of our schemes that were designed with you. And they have something for every type of farmer, from uplands to lowlands, arable to livestock, and of course, tenants. Unlike the Labour Party, we will never introduce mandatory requirements to put a percentage of your land into schemes. Nor will we introduce broad-ranging blanket rules like top-down 20-mile-an-hour mandates. With us, you'll have more choice, not less. And today, we want to go further to support you. So we're announcing new steps to make our schemes more generous and easier to use. Take the managing payment. It's working. with many farmers, small farmers especially, signing up. So I can announce today that we're going to double that payment to £2,000, with thousands of farmers receiving that money this spring. We're also launching the biggest ever package of grants this year to boost productivity and resilience, which will total £220 million, increasing the Improving Farming Productivity Scheme to invest in things like robotics and barn-top solar. We're opening a new round of the Farming Equipment and Technology Fund too, worth £70 million. Second, as farming changes, how we work with you in government must change too. The services we provide must be shaped around your needs. And we've got to build a culture that's based on trust. As President Eisenhower said, you know, farming looks mighty easy when your plow is a pencil and you're 1,000 miles from a cornfield. So we're changing the culture. That means trust, support, cooperation. It means delivering on our promise to cut planning red tape that's stopping you from diversifying. In April, for instance, we'll lay legislation so you can create bigger farm shops or outdoor sports venues. And it means more funding for grassroots mental health support, because we know what a tough job farming is. Thirdly, we're strengthening support for your primary role, to produce the nation's food. Food security is a vital part of our national security. And recent years have brought home the truth of that. Putin set off not just an energy price bomb, but a food price bomb too. And as Minette has so powerfully reminded us time after time, in an age of climate change and instability, global food production will become increasingly volatile. So it's important to strengthen food security here at home. Our Agriculture Act introduced a 3-yearly report to monitor food security. But given how much has happened in the last 3 years, it's clear that we need to go further. So today I can announce that we'll step up our monitoring with a new annual food security index, which we expect to be UK-wide. And yes, Minette will make this statutory when parliamentary time allows. We'll publish the first draft at the Farm to Fork Summit this spring. And I'm also delighted to say that those summits will become an annual event. And one way to improve food security is to stop millions of tons of good, fresh farm food from going to waste, just because of its shape or size. So we'll also provide funding today, £15 million, to redirect that surplus into the hands of those who need it. So in conclusion, supporting farmers, changing our approach, and strengthening food security. That's our plan. And you can trust us to deliver because we already are. You said you wanted a fair price for your products. Tomorrow, we're laying new regulations for the dairy sector, and we're launching a review of the poultry sector. You asked for fair treatment in our trade deals, so we're standing up for farmers in those negotiations, whether it's with Canada or anybody else. You asked for a fairer, more supportive regulatory system, and we've reformed our approach, cutting penalties for minor issues already down by 40%. But more than this, you can trust us because I know how important my neighbours, our farmers, all of you truly are. You help support millions of jobs, add billions to our economy, shape the landscape, but most of all, you produce the food we need. Food that is some of the best and highest quality anywhere in the world. And that's why I say to all of you and to Britain's farmers, just as I did in my very first speech in Parliament, I've got your back. Thank you very much.
Well, let's go straight back to our farmers, Gareth Jones and Kelly Seaton. Well, that was... you're still with us, guys. I was going to say, well, that was mercifully short, actually, because quite often they go on and on and on. Gareth, let's go to you first. Was there anything in that which brought you great hope and cheer?
Sorry?
Could you hear... I'm just saying, did you hear much of the Prime Minister's speech? Was there much in there that brought you any cheer?
Yeah, gosh, yeah, that was a great speech. Fair play to him. Backing British agriculture. Let's just hope that he goes through with what he's saying. Supporting farmers through the supermarkets as well in some kind of legislation. So whatever we're producing, we know what it costs, and then the supermarkets give us a fair cut on that. There is enough in what we're producing to make sure that everybody gets a fair slice of the cake. But let's not forget, we've got to keep food affordable for a lot of poor families as well. And that's difficult, to tick these boxes. You can't kick that speech. There's nothing wrong with it. But as he said, there's a big difference from, a biro than the guys that are out there 7 days a week, 365 days a year in all weathers, producing food in, a really, really difficult time, mentally, physically, emotionally. Yeah. We in Wales are on our knees, and, I just hope this resonates a lot across Great Britain, and that we pull together as a country and start to look at farmers in a different light. Yeah. We are part of the solution for food security, and if you don't see it, we are going to be sleepwalking into food shortages. Yeah, you're right. Kelly, how about for you? Was there enough in that speech there from Rishi Sunak? And like Gareth says, he can talk the talk, but maybe are you waiting to see if he can walk the walk?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great speech. I totally agree with Gareth, but unfortunately it's been reactive rather than proactive. We've been going through this for some time now, and unfortunately it may be too little too late for a lot of farmers when you consider that 49% are considering that they might be hanging in the towel very soon. So fingers crossed, but it's reactive.
Kelly, can you remind us, because I think we were shocked when we had you on the programme before and we said, what do you get paid for milk and what the supermarkets are giving you and how you're unable to make a profit? Just remind us about the returns.
So our milk price is about 36 pence at the moment, and the cost of production is over 40 pence. That's not just for us, that's for many farmers around the UK.
So you're losing money with every drop of milk you produce. And is that the same for you, Gareth?
No, I don't milk.
You're just agriculture.
Sleep. Yeah, beef and sleep. No, beef and sheep we are. Beef. So, we produce a lot of meat. At this moment in time, there's shortages for beef and for lamb, and we're having good prices, but I've got a lot of guys in the poultry and the chicken industry. Well, we've seen what happened to eggs a couple of years ago. Supermarkets have got to give a fair price, and I totally agree with Kelly. The milk industry, again, is on its knees, but we need all to pull together fair prices for all, and I hope Rishi's got everybody's back in this, not just, the English farmers. And I think we need to ring-fence agricultural budgets in Wales as well, and Northern Ireland, and up in Scotland and England. So that money goes to the farmer, so they understand that it's to produce food to feed the nation sustainably and safely.
And buy British whenever we can. I was quite heartened to hear him say, I will support the eating of beef going forward, because he obviously knows that's an issue that a lot of us are tapped into. Kelly Seaton and Gareth Wynne-Jones, thank you so much for so much time this morning. I know you're very busy.
And we'll see Gareth in Cardiff next Wednesday.
Yes, exactly. Good luck with your protest, Gareth. Thank you for telling us about that. Now, we've been talking about bin collections because we are going to be talking about a story where a council has spectacularly failed to collect 1 million bins over a certain amount of time. And Colin has said we're in Sevenoaks Council. Weekly rubbish collection is superb. Black bag for household rubbish, clear bag for recycling. It's collected promptly and efficiently each week. It couldn't be better. Mike says here in Oakdale Pool in Dorset, the team give us an excellent collection service. They collect rubbish 1 week and then recycling waste plus garden on 2 successive days the following week. And I can't remember the last time that was missed. Hillary, Coventry bin collection is perfect. Congratulations to the council.
They're all don't forget you can vote in our poll, our Twitter poll.
Yeah, let us know how happy you are. Gloria, our service here in Daventry, Northants, is brilliant. They work very hard in all weathers. I have to say, at the moment, unanimously, everyone's very happy with the bin collection.
Not
what if it's a London thing? Because we have terrible service in London. My mum's been in touch. She lives in Henley-on-Thames. We're very proud of our bin collection service, Beverly, she says. And they have big wheelie bins. One for the recycling. Don't have to rinse the metal versus the plastic versus the paper like we do. All your recycling in one, your black bin rubbish in another. another, and your green in another.
And what about that
Brilliant.
horrible little brown bin for the food, which is too small and the boxes knock it over?
I can't use that, I'm afraid. I don't mind admitting that. And our bin men are wonderful, says John in Worcestershire. Prompt, regular and good-tempered. Just to be clear, we don't want to criticise the actual bin people.
It's
I can't call them bin men anymore.
the local authorities.
It's the local authorities, those people who get up at the crack of dawn in all weathers to help us. We appreciate your work. It's the councils that don't always pay for it.
If I see mine at Christmas, I always tip them. The poll currently, you've still got 23 minutes to vote. It's 60% in favour of your bin collection, 40% against. So keep voting. You go on to GB News Twitter site or what else? What are they called?
It's called X now.
X. Oh, whatever.
Right, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer is under growing pressure to back an immediate ceasefire in Gaza ahead of a vote on the issue tomorrow.
The left-wing organisation Momentum, that was the group that was behind Jeremy Corbyn's leadership of the Labour Party, is writing to all party members to pressure the local MP to do just that. So joining us now is the former Labour MP and former chairman of the Jewish Labour movement, Ivor Kaplan. Ivor, morning to you. Now, we spoke earlier to somebody who was the Jewish Voices for Labour.
Correct.
Who is deeply, deeply unhappy with Keir Starmer's position and says any decent human being would obviously vote for that Scottish National Party motion tomorrow, which calls for an immediate ceasefire, no frills, no doubts, no ifs, no buts. What's your position?
My position simply is that I don't need to listen to people who have mainly are not in the Labour Party, which is consistent with Momentum and so-called Jewish Views for Labour. The issue, of course, has changed overnight with what the US have proposed in the UN, and we'll see how that progresses during the course of the day. But those who say there should be some sort of immediate stop and it's just out of order. It's just not how you can do anything, because you need two groups, in this case Israel and Hamas, to come together, and that's just not going to happen. So there has to be some proper international work to do this. It's not something that the SNP can go around talking about. They're welcome to their view, but I think in the Labour Party during the course of the next 24 hours, I just don't think it's worth voting for, and I expect that the Labour Party won't vote for it.
Jewish Voices for Labour said that Hamas has changed. It's not the terrible organisation that used to be that wanted to eradicate the state of Israel off the map. I don't know where they've been, because I've heard spokesmen for Hamas saying they don't want a ceasefire because they want to eradicate the state of Israel off the map. Are they wrong, Jewish Voices for Labour?
100% wrong, Andrew. This is the point that they make. If you go out in London on a Saturday, which I've had to do a couple of times, you see these people shouting about why there should be a ceasefire, why this should happen, etc., etc. And it's absolutely out of order. It's just not really a sensible set of ideas that anyone could put forward. And in doing that, all you are doing is bringing people more and making people more angry, as we saw this last Saturday when there were a numerous number of arrests. And it's just a situation where these people do not understand international diplomacy. And I've got absolute confidence that in both the government and in the Labour Party, both parties will come to a conclusion that you can't just do things because someone says so. What you have to do is to build a proper international way of bringing this matter forward. And one point I make consistently to you and colleagues, Andrew and Bev, is simply that the two-state solution is a centrepiece of what we need to do. To do that, everyone has to get round the table, particularly those in Palestine who actually want a two-state solution, because it gives them the first chance to have a proper organisation.
The thing is, Ivor,
for the Palestinian people.
What Naomi Wimborne Idrissi was getting at was this idea that this is so binary, it is so divisive. We know generations of division here. And then actually, whilst the bombing in Gaza is continuing, it is innocent civilians, predominantly children, 30,000 orphaned children in Gaza at the moment. Something has to be done now in order to stop those bombs, presumably, and reach some sort of resolution.
Well, we also, Bev, have to remember that there are still 140 people who've been taken away from Israel by Hamas. And those people, some of whom have actually died as well, those people need to be released. And I saw that Israel, amongst other things, was saying to Hamas, we need to have these people back if we're to get any progress at all on any form of ceasefire. The idea that we can have a ceasefire overnight is frankly for the birds. It's not something that internationally can work.
OK, all right, thank you so much. MP and former chair of the Jewish Labour Movement, Ivor Kaplan there. And the news that he mentioned that came overnight from the US, this is that the US has proposed that a UN Security Council resolution would call for a temporary ceasefire and for Israel not to go ahead with a planned offensive on Rafah in southern Gaza.
That will be vetoed by Russia.
And maybe, and it will obviously affect, I guess, to some degree, like Ivor said then about what happens in the House of Commons tomorrow.
Yeah. Ivor's very shrewd and very plugged in, and of course he's much more plugged into Labour Party than Naomi is.
Blooming complicated, isn't it?
It is complicated. Now, still to come, you know your tin of golden syrup? Well, the Lion that's been on Lion's Golden Syrup tin since 1881, the oldest unchanged brand of packaging, is about to change.
Oh, no.
Of course it is.
I'm heartbroken. My porridge will never be the same. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Chris, what is the preferred way in which the police go about their business at the moment? There's these two strands of thinking: evidence-based policing versus bobbies on the beat.
It's very, very difficult. The problem that police have got, basically, is that they're too thinly spread, and it's too much is expected of them. There's a long list, isn't it? Every month we hear police need to do more about this, police need to do more about that, and police do their best. They're overwhelmed with bureaucracy. I mean, when I was a young PC, if I took a shoplifter in, then I'd be in and out within an hour. You take a shoplifter in now, and you're doomed for the rest of your shift for 6 or 7 hours dealing with the bureaucracy. Police want to get back in those communities because community policing is really the core of policing. But such are the demands on their time at the moment, and the bureaucracy, and the fact that they are struggling now to retain experienced officers. People are hemorrhaging out of the police, and new recruits coming in haven't got that experience, and there's a good chance they may not stay anyway. So there's all sorts of problems. And for the Home Secretary to glibly say he wants more done, frankly, clearly shows he's got no understanding of the pressure police are under, and of course the constant criticism that they face across the board. Very rarely do you actually hear of police officers getting praised for acts of bravery or acts of compassion. So there's a problem with morale in the police force, and clearly a problem with the Home Secretary, who needs to get out there and talk to officers on the front line who frankly are struggling. And last night, of course, was a graphic example.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
11:21 with Britain's News on GBNews, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. The panel are back. GBNews senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and, of course, the wonderful Tonya Buxton.
Can we just reflect a little bit on how positive our farmers were about what Rishi Sunak said to them? He obviously hit the right note this morning, Nigel. The farmers liked it. Our viewers like it as well.
Well, he's giving them some money, isn't he? I mean, he's offering them 220 million for some high tech. But I think you've got to put
get the food out the ground. Well, that's not a bad idea.
No, I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying that I think he's the first PM who's been there for
2008.
Gordon Brown. Gordon Brown was the last one who addressed the NFU. It's election year.
Yeah.
He's losing votes in rural areas, so he's got to do something to try and appease the farmers. They're pretty fed up about the cost of production at the moment. They're fed up about the lack of labour post-Brexit because they can't get things like fruit and vegetables up anymore.
Cheap labour, you mean?
Yeah, cheap labour, basically, the people who came across to go and do that. And rural crime's a problem. So instead, what he's done is he's given a bit of money, nice short speech, job done.
And some of the public, though, are getting in touch, Tonya, to say, Jackie said, I've just walked in, I'm listening to Sunak, I thought someone had died, he's dull, dull, dull. There's a lot of people saying that his delivery is not great. Anthony said, will someone please check the audience is still awake? I've never heard such a boring delivery of any speech. He's a condescending muppet.
Yes, he is, but, you know, I don't know whether that we should be judging people on the man or their policies.
Correct.
And unfortunately, if his policies were nice and sharp and good,
we wouldn't
then
mind.
I wouldn't care that he's a dull deliverer. It doesn't bother me.
We've got
really
two dull
doesn't.
deliverers, haven't we? We've got
we really
the Prime
do have.
Minister's dull. I think he's not as dull as Keir Starmer. When I heard
No one's as dull as Keir Starmer,
the Labour Conference,
please.
I was listening on the radio, I thought, oh, turn that. I had to turn the radio.
Neither of them are great public speakers.
Yeah, but Starmer's voice, it's awful. Keir.
Well, I mean, but neither of them are... I mean, they're both very managerial, aren't they? It is like choosing between two bank managers.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's a bad idea to have a Prime Minister, you know, a bank manager as a Prime Minister, frankly, but there you go.
But dull and boring.
Well, like Tonya says, if the policies were dynamite, you wouldn't mind whether their delivery what it was like. Right, let's talk about Julian Assange. Tonya, this is a name that pops in and out of the media and has done for the last... How many years has he been incarcerated now?
Five.
Five. 7 years. Yeah, I think it's more than that.
Don't forget, he was in the embassy for years.
That's right. Yeah.
So he's facing spying charges in the US and he's in court, I believe, today, Tonya.
To try and stop his extradition to the US. So what is he being punished for? From what I can tell, he is being punished for the crime of journalism, which unfortunately a lot of our journalists haven't been doing, because he would release this information and it would be in all the papers.
The WikiLeaks.
The WikiLeaks, the information about what's going on in Iran and all the things that have happened that we as the public have the right to know. And, you know, so he's going to go, if he goes to America, if they send him, it'll be 175 years he'll go in for espionage. Now, this has got to change. And also, we should have laws. We do have laws in Britain that prevent us from extraditing people for political reasons to the US. So I don't know why Priti Patel has got involved here and said that she's going to change that
Special
law.
relationship.
What special relationship?
That's what they tell us.
What special relationship? And ultimately, this man is telling truths. So he's going to go to prison for 175 years for revealing the truth. That could be wrong.
So he published this, just to remind people, it was a huge number, wasn't it, of confidential documents that he put on a website, WikiLeaks, it was called.
Yeah.
You think he should be brought to book, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Nigel?
Yeah, I do.
As a journalist, people might think, why would Nigel Nelson say
OK, but as a journalist, I mean, I believe in free speech.
Sure.
I also believe that the right to free speech carries with it a duty to be responsible.
Yeah.
What Julian Assange did was take a whole load of secret documents, dump them on the internet without knowing what was actually in them. So some of it was quite innocuous. There's things like Colonel Gaddafi was a great fan of flamenco dancing, for instance.
Really?
Yeah, well, according to WikiLeaks, yeah. And those came from the secret cables. There are much more serious stuff there, where people lost their lives because they were secret agents for America.
And it exposed where they were.
Exposed their names, it exposed where they were. Some managed to get out. There was a huge kind of rescue operation to get people out. And that's what I mean about dumping stuff that you haven't gone through. So if, as a responsible journalist, you would go through that material and say, OK, that could put someone's life at risk, we will leave that bit out. Instead, he just threw the whole lot onto the internet.
OK, so maybe I can agree with you that that could well have been a mistake, but you think that he should go to jail for 175 years because of that, because there was a lot of information that we as the public needed to know. I mean, let's bear in mind that, you know, child murders and paedophiles don't go to jail for years on end. They're talking about putting him in jail for espionage for 175 years.
It did lead to the deaths of spies and people, undercover
We
officers
don't
who
know
were doing their job.
We don't know that for sure, though.
We do.
Could have.
No, we do.
We don't know anyone that has died.
We do know that. We do know that people lost their lives because of it, because they were identified. So as a result of that...
Well, they fiercely deny that. The Assange team do fiercely deny that.
Yeah.
That there was dissidents, journalists, sources, human rights activists. But they say there is no evidence that those people lost their lives as a direct result of this information. I like transparency. I like free speech. I like a lack of censorship.
Yeah.
I think, so you see, this is why he's so divisive, because some people see him as a hero, putting information out there that may be dark and murky, but perhaps we as the public need to see.
But society has changed, Beverly, in the sense that we don't trust anymore our
Correct.
governments. Our governments are not trustworthy anymore. We know that, you know, Blair took us to a war that we didn't need to go to through lies. So we do not trust our governments. We need to see this information so we can judge for ourselves. The public needs to judge for ourselves.
Do you not think that's...
trust in governments anymore.
Back to the spying thing, how can you be certain, Nigel, that people did die as a result of the WikiLeaks exposure?
I haven't got the names in front of me, but some people were, some people were caught and were killed as a result of it.
I think we're in the Middle East.
Yeah, that's what, but they're mostly Middle East agents. I mean, the point here, the argument about throwing everything out there, having no secrets, do you not think a nation needs to keep some secrets for its own protection?
I mean, what the authorities who are trying to get him prosecuted say is that he released evidence of war crimes, well, people who want to defend him, war crimes, human rights abuses, and that we as the public have a right to know. And it might be uncomfortable for the American administration and the British administration to know that those were done on our watch, but that should still be given the...
I'm not against that. I'm not against that. The point I'm making about doing it journalistically is if you have a big pile of documents, you go through them and you decide from those which ones need releasing in the public interest.
Can I also just say the US government, and if WikiLeaks had to do with the death of people, that would be terrible. But is it more than the deaths of people in Afghanistan in the way that America left Afghanistan? The hypocrisy of them blaming Assange for people's deaths when they just left people to die, left them there. So, I mean, it's just hypocrisy. And what we want is transparency and truth and to judge ourselves because we're sick of the spin and the lies that we are being told by governments around the world.
We've got to get onto the tin of syrup, which Beverly uses for her porridge every morning. On the Lyle's golden syrup tin. It's been on that tin for 150 years. They're changing it because it's a flea-ridden lion.
Why are they changing it, Tonya?
So it's quite interesting. So the guy that founded Lyle's, he was very religious, and so he took from the Book of Judges, Samson kills a lion, and then he takes honey out of a hive that had formed in the dead lion's body, and that's what that depicts. I don't understand the problem about it. And what he said is, out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. It's just a religious kind of symbol. Who cares?
Who knew?
Who knew?
Well, yeah, I mean, also, I'm not quite sure I quite understand it. I mean, it's a biblical quote that comes from the Book of Judges, and it's about Samson who takes a beehive out of a lion. Yeah. It does seem, even in 1881, an odd marketing kind of proposal.
That tin of syrup is iconic. Everybody knows that.
Well, do we know what they're changing the branding to?
Yeah, just one lion and a bee.
Smiley kind of softer lion, not kind of lying on its
But it'll still be on the tins. If you get your golden syrup for breakfast on a tin.
Well, they do it in squeezy bottles now.
It'll still be there. A squeezy bottle is the one where they change it. Sorry?
Is this an anti-Christian thing?
I don't think so.
Are you sure? Are we sure?
I'm not sure. I think they're trying to modernise it. I think it's a shame because I think it's something quite beautiful about keeping it from 1881.
Yes,
and it's quite beautifully iconic, and it depicts, you know. And I like the saying that because what he did is at his wedding he read out that little poem. You know, I'll read it again. Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. I quite like it.
Yeah. I like it.
You know, it's got a romance to it. So it's a shame they're changing it.
Yeah. I think so.
Well,
Nothing sacred. That's the problem.
Thank you both. If they're watching, I would love some free syrup. Now, still to come. Are you happy? Shameless.
With bin collection, and we are going to name the town where people say there have been 1 million bins that weren't collected in the last, less than a year. They say there's so many, they'd stretch all the way from the town to Paris.
Gosh, but according to our Twitter poll, most of you are very happy with the bin collection in your area. Some good news, it seems. First, though, your morning's news with Sam.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's just gone 11:30 and we start this half hour with some breaking news that we've heard in the last few minutes, that MP for Blackpool South, Scott Benton, has had his appeal against his suspension from Parliament dismissed today, which could trigger another by-election. He was suspended in April 2023 after suggesting to an undercover reporter at the Times that he would be willing to break lobbying rules for money. He, though, denied any wrongdoing and appealed a recommended 35-day suspension after Parliament's Standards Committee found him in serious breach of the rules. Well, in their ruling today, an independent panel said they found no substance in his arguments, and MPs will now vote on Benton's punishment. If it passes, a by-election, as I said, could be triggered. The Prime Minister says that new funding will be given to farmers to protect the country's food security and ensure a fairer pricing. Addressing the National Farmers Union conference in Birmingham earlier, Rishi Sunak unveiled new funding to increase productivity and modernise technology such as robotics and solar power. He's also pledged to cut red tape, making it easier for farmers to develop new buildings or open farm shops. Mr Sunak says British farmers are essential to the country's food security.
One way to improve food security is to stop millions of tonnes of good, fresh farm food from going to waste, just because of its shape or size. So we'll also provide funding today, £15 million, to redirect that surplus into the hands of those who need it.
And new figures have revealed today that the majority of parents think all primary-age children in England should get free school meals. It comes after a scheme was implemented in London primary schools, which 88% of parents want to see rolled out across the rest of the nation. And that same survey found 52% of parents have had to cut back on their food shops since September. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code on your screen, or of course go to our website, gbnews.com/alerts.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a look at the markets this morning. The pound will buy you $1.2601 and €1.1665. The price of gold is currently £1,609.30 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,729 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Right, up next, Tom and Emily, they're here with us. What have you got on the show today, guys?
We heard a little bit about it in the news there. News just in the last few minutes that the appeal lodged by the MP for Blackpool South, Scott Benton, against his suspension from the Commons has failed. What does that mean in plain English? It's likely there'll be another by-election. All that's needed is 10% of his constituents to lodge a petition for a by-election now, and one will take place. So that's incredibly likely.
Is it going to be worth having an election later this year? Because there's going to be so many by-elections by the time we get there. It'll be a completely different government anyway.
We've got one more by-election at the end of this month. We had 2 by-elections on Thursday. We'll now be having another one in probably around 6 to 8 weeks' time. I mean, the number of by-elections is just
how many have we actually had? And then adding
Hmm.
that to the 100 or so MPs who are going to be standing down before the next election.
Yeah, it's vast.
slim pickings.
It's actually... By 1997, in John Major's government, there'd been so many by-elections for various reasons, and he had quite a slim majority in 1992, that by 1997, John Major technically didn't have a majority government anymore. He was running a hung parliament, in effect. Thankfully, for the Conservatives' perspective, Boris Johnson won an 80-seat majority. So even if there's been a huge rate of attrition on that, it's likely they'll still have a reasonable...
It's below 60
It's below 60. It's heading down towards... I think it's closer to 50 than 60 after these by-elections.
I spoke to a Tory MP at the weekend who said he reckons the election is going to be January 25.
I don't know that.
Oh, really now? So,
what are you thinking?
Certainly not that May election, then.
No,
Well, that's the
it's
latest
possible.
he could go.
It is the latest because the way it works is that the Parliament runs for 5 years. Now, you could dissolve Parliament on, what was it, the 12th of December when we had the election in 2019. So 5 years from then, you could dissolve Parliament. But you could still have a 6-week general election campaign. So the next Parliament wouldn't be elected until January 2025.
What's your money on, Em? What's your money on?
Go on, Tom. Spill.
Oh, I'd say October.
October. OK, I'm going to go with October because I'll defer to our, political journalist over here.
I don't know, but the tricky thing about October, November is it's right in the midst of the US election.
Yeah.
And that will be dominating the airwaves as well. That will be a very difficult thing.
But why
to
is that?
navigate.
Why is that an issue?
Because I can totally see Rishi Sunak waiting until January next year. He'll get the American election out of the way. He's waiting for something good news to land or for Labour to mess up in some way.
But it means campaigning over Christmas. No one wants that.
But I think there's still a possibility of an early poll if these Gaza war issues continue to be deviled the Labour
We want to talk to you, but instead of that, we'll watch you for 3 hours from 12 o'clock. Right.
Yes,
you are with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Don't go anywhere. Quick break.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Claire, you want to talk by cars growing by a couple of centimetres a year?
Yeah, well, 1 centimetre every 2 years.
Okay.
It's unrelenting because the people are so fixated on the big SUVs. The sales have gone through the roof, and yet it's James Nix, the analyst for Transport and Environment Campaign, said the author of the report on the trend said, spurred on by sales of the largest SUVs, vehicles are getting wider every year. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, it means that our roads weren't...
Comfortable ride, beautiful engines, smooth. I mean, it's luxury, it's gorgeous.
Well, as I know, I used to have two, but I don't...
You used to have 2 SUVs?
Well, one SUV at a time, but I had 2 brands of them. But I'd no longer drive in London now because I just don't see the point, because of the ULEZ, because of the, you can run down a thing and get fined.
Parking spaces, whatever.
The growth in car size also causes issues for their drivers. The report found that largely luxury SUVs, which are about 2 metres wide, no longer fit in off-street parking.
That's true.
They also leave too little space for passengers to get in and out of the vehicles in typical off-street spaces, and they're about 2.4 metres wide, the report found. And I'll tell you, I was stuck in a bus last night trying to get home, and the buses couldn't move because the streets were too crammed with all of these massive cars either side.
Chelsea tractors.
And it was gridlocked.
Yeah, but maybe they're not the problem, maybe the buses are the problem.
The buses take people to their place of work and get
I'd
them
like
home.
to know when, because when I go through London, all I see is empty buses.
Oh, you're lucky. Every time I'm on one, they're full.
Well, they're obviously only full at rush hour. You see, the thing is, property developers, when they do high-rise car parks or, they build a multiplex cinema and there's a car park attached to it, that's not my fault that I can't fit into their space. It's their fault. So
it's all driven by money, isn't it? The more spaces that they have, the more people they can get.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
11:40, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. Prince William's going to visit the synagogue today.
And he's going to meet aid workers to recognise the human suffering caused by the war in Gaza. So Cameron Walker is here to tell us all about it.
Yeah, quite a bold move from Prince William, isn't it?
Because this is a minefield diplomatically.
Yeah.
The Queen never went to Israel.
No, it's a hugely contentious issue, but in 2018, Prince William did become the first senior royal to visit both Israel and the West Bank, so there is perhaps a bit of form. I think what's striking to me this morning is that following the Hamas terrorist attack after October 7th, the Prince of Wales' spokesperson released an incredibly strongly worded statement talking about the, and I quote, Hamas terrorist attack being appalling and Israel exercising its right to self-defence. Now, the statement this morning is not quite as strongly worded. It's recognising the human suffering and talking that Prince William is going to recognise that. But it doesn't go into quite such strong detail because clearly over the last couple of months, this has become more and more contentious. So Prince William is doing a couple of engagements over the next couple of weeks. He's going to be visiting aid workers, speaking to aid workers, perhaps also talking to people who've actually been in Gaza, helping those Palestinians stuck there. But he's also going to be speaking to young people about the global rise in anti-Semitism as well. So I think he's trying to please both sides here. Of course, as the monarchy's whole point is unifying people. Clearly, this country at the moment's perhaps to do with this conflict is very polarised and very divided, so we'll have to wait and see how it goes down with the general population.
This will all have been cleared through the Foreign Office and number 10.
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing happens by accidents with the royal family. Most of Prince William's aides have some government experience anyway. I'd be highly surprised if he did not consult, or Kensington Palace did not consult both the Foreign Office and the Cabinet Office to do with this. So I think if the Prime Minister or the government had a particular issue of Prince William highlighting this, they would have said so and it wouldn't be happening.
It's an interesting area for him to be in, it really is. I think it's quite a significant moment.
And you think, good luck trying to unite people on this issue. He couldn't have picked a more divisive issue if he tried, really, could he? It is pretty, I'd say, quite bold of him, actually. Do we know anything about our other ailing royals? How do we know how the King is, whether any word on the Princess of Wales?
So the last time we saw the King in public was at Sandringham, walking to the church. He clearly wants to be seen. Every time we see him travelling in a car, it's the big Bentley with the big windows. He wants to show that message of reassurance that he seems to be OK at the moment. Of course, he is receiving cancer treatment, but it doesn't seem to be debilitating him too much. He's still very much working behind the scenes. The Princess of Wales, as we understand it, is back in Windsor. Clearly, she's not carrying out engagements until Easter, but I think her recovery appears to be going to plan because Prince William is out and about today. He was at the BAFTAs on Sunday as well, but clearly it's a bit inconvenient for the royal family. It's very slim indeed at the moment.
And isn't there a story in the papers today, this might be a bit mean putting this on you, Cameron, but about Prince George maybe going to change schools?
Yeah, so one of the papers was reporting that the Prince and Princess of Wales had looked at a particular school in Oxfordshire because it's got a sustainability course or something. There's lots of speculation as to which school Prince George is going to be going to.
That's what you look for when you're looking for a school for your child. Do you think, have they got a sustainability what?
Seen as the green.
Sustainability course or something like that.
He's got to be seen as the Green Prince.
Yeah, but I must stress, nothing's been confirmed by Kensington Palace. They're looking at a number of schools for Prince George, and it's still a number of years, I think, before they'll confirm which one he's going to.
Including Eton, I imagine.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Right, OK, Cameron, thank you. And we got some breaking news, actually. A body believed to be that of the Clapham alkali attack suspect, Abdul Azidi, has been found in the water at Tower Pier on the River Thames in central London. It was found on Monday. Scotland Yard have said we'll have more reaction to that in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World. Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones is the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yep.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially, just as a scoping exercise really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, you know, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr Jane, and I guess for some people, you know, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Absolutely. So speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, we asked you at home, are you happy with your bin collections? Nearly 40% of you in our poll said no, and you're not alone, because the Conservatives in Swindon claim that over 1 million bins have been missed from collection in the town since May. That's enough to reach Paris if they were lined up.
That's right. The tally is disputed by members of the Labour Council, who say it is double and triple counting. They've also given us this response. It appears that a select few Swindon Conservatives want to focus on effects, but are unsurprisingly reticent to discuss the cause of the issues that happened under their watch. By not adequately resourcing the project stage in 2022, they go on, it resulted in incorrect critical data, flawed mechanical assumptions and a lack of adequate back-office system supplies. The problems that we are left with to resolve are systemic and deep-rooted, and we will continue to work hard to rebuild the service. Oh, I love a bit of civil service speak, don't you?
Let's get the Tory MP for North Swindon, Justin Tomlinson, on. Justin, morning to you. I was in Swindon fairly recently. Everyone was talking about the fact their bins aren't being collected on time.
Yeah, and we did. We passed 1 million missed collections since Labour took control of the council on Valentine's Day. And not exactly a landmark people were hoping for. It's running at around 43% of collections are missed. We keep getting told either there's no problem or it's about to get better. I can assure you that is not the case.
So let me tell you what one of our viewers who lives in Swindon says, Justin, Karina. She said it used to be that the service was wonderful. They're trying to do more recycling. The bins have not been collected since before Christmas. Apparently, the new refuse trucks are too small and they're catching up now. Do you have any idea whether such a complete mess-up has occurred?
Yeah, I mean, you know, our councillors have offered to help. We believe the communication was poor in the beginning. They left the launch too late, so they left it till the bad weather, and obviously that compounded problems in the early days. That they didn't pilot anything, so overnight we went from the old system to the new system. And if they had actually done some pilots, they would have realised they needed to change some of the routes, change the capacity, increase the mop-up crews. They have no project manager, so it's really difficult to get anybody to take accountability. So councillors are just simply having to repeatedly report missed collections. Sometimes some are collected on time, others you can wait a week, 10 days, but on average it is currently running at 43% missed collections since Labour took control of the council. That is not acceptable in any way.
We just want to explain, Justin, to those people who are listening on the radio, there were some extraordinary scenes there of literally piles of rotting rubbish being collected. I mean, how bad is it? I mean, how big are these piles of rubbish?
Well, we first had problems in the summer before they changed over the system. They'd changed the sort of working arrangements with the staff. We then had probably about a 6-week period where things settled down. Then they did the big bang of the launch of the new system. But in some areas, you know, it's not days, it's weeks that waste and recycling has been missed. When you then have periods of bad weather and that waste then gets spread around, it just compounds it, which is causing concern around rats and health issues. Look, you know, the staff on the front line are working their best. You know, they're working long hours. They're doing their best. It is not their fault. But not having a project manager, poor communications, denial, lack of responsibility, and that failure to pilot the scheme, to just test it out. If they'd picked a couple of routes, checked, realised things were not quite as they had hoped, they could have made adjustments before, not afterwards, because at the moment all they're doing is just chasing their tail and seemingly not making progress.
There's clearly an accountability deficit, which should be the phrase of 2024 so far, frankly. But Labour are accusing you, Justin, of manipulating the figures for political gain, and they're just trying their hardest.
Well, it's not me. I mean, it's my Conservative councillor colleagues who did the Freedom of Information request that their council provided the data that shows since the day they took control of the council, by February the 14th, 1 million collections were missed, which is running at 43%. Now, looking at our record on the council, we ran at around 12% missed collections. Not perfect, but that's probably fairly typical across most local authorities in the country. And even then, generally, you would only wait a day because there were mop-up crews that would then catch up with what was often the end of the previous day's collections. It's their own figures, but this just sums up that they wanted to run the council, but they don't want the responsibility when things go wrong. They could fix this easily.
Is this going to cause problems with mice and rats, Justin?
Yeah, it has, and we see this. I mean, if you were to go on to any of the community groups on Facebook, it's just a running commentary of collective horror stories, particularly compounded if there is a period of bad weather. And that was another one of the challenges that our councillors have put forward, is they delayed the launch to the point of the worst weather of the year. What they should have done is look to do this in better weather. And as I said, if they'd piloted some of the rounds first, they'd have realised they needed to adjust the rounds, the capacity, the hours that the staff are working, and we wouldn't have got ourselves into this mess. But it is frustrating that this isn't a few weeks. This has just been going on, and we keep being told it's all going to be fine now. But us Swindon residents, we're not seeing that improvement.
All right, Justin. That's Justin Tomlinson, the MP for North Swindon. That's my hometown.
Is it really?
It is, and I've never seen overflowing bins like that.
You can't just do the basics. Honestly, what are we paying our council tax for? Right, that is it from us, from Britain's Newsroom for today. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 9:30, but here are Tom and Emily with Good Afternoon Britain.
After a manhunt that spanned the nation and lasted weeks, a body has been discovered in the River Thames. The Metropolitan Police believe this is the body of the suspect chemical attacker Abdul Azadi. We will have so much more throughout the programme.
And we've just heard that the triple killer in Nottingham, Valdo Calacane, will have his sentence reviewed by the Court of Appeal. Some say his sentence was far too lenient. All of that after the weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good day to you. I'm Alex Berkill, and here's your latest GB News weather update. It is going to be a very wet day for many of us tomorrow, but before then we have a spell of wet and windy weather pushing its way southeastwards across the country. That's in association with a cold front that has already brought some rain across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland already today, and it is now pushing into parts of Northern England and Wales too. Ahead of this, we are likely to stay mostly dry across the southeast, at least during daylight hours, but behind it we have a scattering of showers across Parts of Scotland, some of these could be heavy, perhaps even thundery, with some hail and some winteriness over the higher ground too. A bit fresher towards the northwest behind the front, but in the southeast it is again going to be mild, temperatures well above average for the time of year. The rain pushes its way into southern areas as we go through the evening and overnight, so a cloudy, damp picture here. Clearer skies further north, allowing for a touch of frost across parts of Scotland to start the night, but as we go through the early hours we are going to see that swathe of wet weather feeding into many areas. That will lift the temperatures as we are going to see plenty of cloud and some strong winds with it too. That rain then pushes to all areas as we go through tomorrow morning, so a very wet start to the day for many of us. The heaviest rain likely to be in the southwest. Here we are likely to see some impacts with disruption to travel and some localised flooding too, but the rain does clear away towards the east as we go through the afternoon, with something brighter following in behind. Temperatures still above average for the time of year, but it is going to be windy. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla